Hi, I'm Muir. Welcome back for another Tool Time Tuesday. In this video, I am making the forged ring out of the book Professional Jewelry Making. It is project number 12. Let's get started now. Now in this project, I am making a forged ring and I'm going to start off with a very thick piece of silver. In this case, I'm working with sterling silver. I have also done this ring in gold and brass. Brass is awful to work with, so I highly suggest you don't do that one. It doesn't move as easily or as well. Copper is beautiful to work with as far as its forging capabilities. Sterling silver is going to take a little bit more effort than the copper. So if you're just doing this for the first time, wanting to learn that skill, I highly suggest copper for your first piece. But first thing I need to do is I've got this wire that's currently 5 millimeters, which is approximately 4 gauge. I need to get this down to 3.5 millimeters square. I'm going to use my rolling mill, but you can also use a draw plate if you have that, or you could forge it. Now another option that you have is to order the proper size. 3.5 millimeters square is approximately 6 gauge, but not quite. So you know, even if you started off with like the 6 gauge, you're going to be just a little larger than that 3.5 millimeters. So somehow you're going to still have to get that down. Let's get started. Now that I have it rolled into the square, I am going to anneal this and pickle it, and then we can begin our forming. So now that we have our wire, it's square, it's 3.5 millimeter, mine happens to be spot on. You want to get really close to that. If you're a little bit under or a little bit over, it's not going to be a big deal, but you do want to get as close as you can. Now the book suggests that you cut this into a 50 millimeter piece and then form it around your ring mandrel with a mallet and then follow up with some ring closing pliers. Now, one, I don't have the ring closing pliers, and two, I'm going to show you a trick that Alan showed me when I was working with him earlier this year. And we're going to form this around and then use our ring mandrel to true it up and get it to the right size. Now what he suggested that we do is put this into a vise, and I want to make sure it's clamped on here pretty good. And I'm going to then bring this, now this has been well annealed as you can see because this is super thick gauge here, but you're going to just kind of bring this around and wrap it here on top of itself, kind of like so. And this has gotten really hard really fast. So I'm no longer actually able to get this by hand. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some pliers to help me continue to bring this around. And I happen to have a pair of parallel jaw pliers that are pretty heavy duty. So I'm going to use this, grab that here, and again help me just kind of form this around like so. And there we go. So now what I'm going to do is put this onto my ring mandrel and get it to the right size. We want to start off with about a size 4, which is approximately a 14 millimeter inner diameter. All right. Okay, so now I have this sitting on here, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use, in this case, I have a nylon dead blow hammer, and I'm just going to tap this down here a little bit until we are at approximately the right place. Now once I have this, I'm going to use my jeweler's saw to cut through this, and we should be ready to start. The next thing I need to do is get this into place. So I am going to hold with one pair of pliers, and I am going to just kind of twist these closed. Now in this case, mine don't line up exactly, so I am also going to use the hammer to help get everything lined up nicely. And here we are pretty close, but I just have just a little bit more movement that needs to be made to make that nice and tight, and we are ready to solder this. First thing I'm going to do is put my boric acid wash on this. This is going to help prevent any fire scale from getting on here. So now that I have the boric acid on here, I'm going to use just a little bit of flux right here at the seam. I don't need to go too far. And I'm going to actually put this solder on here by pick soldering. So once we get up to temperature, then I'll pick it up and bring that in. All right, once we've ensured that we have a really good seam, and this one is beautiful, I'm going to quench this, pickle it, and we will get ready to forging. So now I have my ring. It's fairly round, but it's not totally. So there's some adjusting that I need to do to that. I also need to clean up some of the solder around the seam. It's going to be especially important if you are using copper. You do not want to knock that silver solder into your piece because you will never get it out no matter what you do. So take time right now, get that all cleaned up, and then we are going to round this out and begin our forming. For this next phase, I'm going to be using a Goldsmith hammer. Goldsmith hammer has two faces, one that has a slightly domed, flat, round face, and then we have a cross peen on the back end. So the first thing I'm going to do is round this out and get it into position, get everything nice and even. Okay, and we are sitting right at a size 4 on my mandrel, so we're pretty good to go here. So I'm going to forge this in two different planes. The one is going to be this outer portion that is going to become the bottom of our ring. Then I'm going to move to the block here, my bench block that I have, and I'm going to forge the top part of the ring. And you're going to go back and forth between these two areas and making sure also that you forge each side of the ring. So when I'm working on the ring mandrel, I'm going to do a little bit of forging here, and then I'm going to flip it around and do some more. Now, you're going to want to have your calipers handy because you're going to be needing to take measurements as we go on this. Our end goal is to have a ring that is about a size 6. If you want to forge it a little bit more than that, you can. There's also going to be quite a bit of metal removal, and you'll see that as we go. Now, as we forge this, we do not want the mid sections to be forged. Right now they are 3.5 millimeters, and that's where we would like them to stay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my Sharpie and I'm just going to mark kind of the midpoint on here, and I'm going to bring that all the way around so that I have a visual reference point of kind of where to lighten up my hammer blows as I'm going, and that's going to help me be cognizant of where I'm tapering to, both when I'm forging the top and then also when I'm forging the bottom of the ring. I'm going to begin using the rounded curved section of my planishing hammer. When I get closer to these side marks that I've just made, I'm going to strike a little less hard, so much more light on that end of it, and that's going to allow me to keep that 3.5 millimeter diameter or measurement right there that I want. Now, as I do this, the ring is going to enlarge, and so I'm going to want to push this down on my ring mandrel as we go. And just kind of pay attention to your blows. You want to try to overlap these so that it makes a nice, smooth surface as you're working. As you're working through this, make sure that you periodically take and flip that ring over, and that way you get that nice even inside when you're working on a tapered mandrel. Do not be afraid to really hammer on this. This is not a light, dainty process. You are going to need some strength behind your hammer blows to get this metal to move. Make sure you're taking measurements as you go. We want to eventually have this inside of our ring be 1.8 millimeters. And so what we want to do is we want to just forge down until we are starting to see that movement. We should see us getting wider here at the bottom, and then from top to bottom we want to start getting thinner there as well. Once we've done a couple of courses here of forging, now we're going to move up here to the top portion, and that's going to be done on the bench block. Now on this section, we are going to be using the cross peen on here, and we are going to use this and keep it all in the same plane. Like, I don't want to come around like that. What happens when we're forging with a cross peen, it is going to stretch our metal to the front and the back of that, and we want to elongate the top of this. So by keeping our hammer this way, it allows us to stretch the metal out. And as before, we want to be a little lighter on our hammer blows as we come to that midpoint of the ring. And that's really what's going to give us that beautiful tapered look. And just as we did on the ring mandrel, you want to flip this over and forge from the other side as well. Now at this point, we should start to see the top of this ring elongating out, as well as thinning down here at that that top part of it. So now we have a wider base, a thinner top, but we're elongating here, and then we're narrowing out from top to bottom on the inside to the outside of the ring. And we are going to continue to do this. If you start to notice that your ring is not moving or your metal is not moving like it was before, then you need to anneal it, come back, and repeat the process. As you go through, be sure you continue to take your measurements so that you can see where you are and how far you have still to go, or how close you have come. Once you anneal the piece, again, use your Scotch-Brite just to clean everything back up again. And you should start to see some movement really happening after annealing.
So at this point, we are almost there. I'm just shy of a size 6. And I also have like my dimensions on the outside that are almost there, but not quite. But I'm going to be doing some filing and shaping, and that's going to get us to where we need to be. So first, I'm going to file the inside of my ring until we get down to that size 6. Once the inside of the ring is done, it's time to work on the outside. One of the things that you can do is use a pair of half-round pliers. You want to place them just below that ring so that you don't hit your pliers, and they can help you to hold the ring as you file. Now here's another interesting tool that Alan actually introduced me to, and I believe it is a knife sharpening system, but it has 4 different sides with different grits. So there's 200, 300, 400, and 600 grit on here. And what you do is you want to work with this a little bit wet, so it's kind of got a diamond coated surface on it. And so what I'm going to do is just use my spray bottle, wet it down a little bit, and then I'm just going to rub my ring back and forth on here. And what that's going to do is ensure that I sand this down all to a nice flat plane. And I'm going to continue to do this through the different grits until I'm ready to take this up to more of a polish. Once you have the faces taken care of, then you're going to use your file and do the outside of the ring as well, and just make sure everything is aligned properly and nice and smooth. And you remove all of the different hammer marks. So now that I have everything pretty much roughed out, I don't have anything polished yet, it's just kind of a nice smooth finish, everything is even. What I need to do now is cut out the place for my pearl. Now in my case, my pearl is just a little over 6 millimeters. So what I like to do is just use one of these little circle templates, and I'll put my pearl in here to see kind of where it fits. So in this case, mine is a metric, or not metric unit rather. It is 15/64 or 0.234 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is use that to draw onto the top part of my ring here. And you want to just take a moment, make sure that you are oriented properly. I want to leave about 1 millimeter down at the bottom or so, and that is going to become the base for our stem or the pearl peg that we are going to be doing. So like I said, make sure you leave yourself some room there, and I'm going to use my scribe and just scribe around that to create my mark for where I'm going to cut. And now I'm going to cut that out with my jeweler's saw. Once I have that center point cut out, I'm going to use my half round file to file this smooth and make sure that it's the right size. I like to take my pearl and just use it as a guide so that I know how far down to open up this semicircle. Once you have everything ready to go, now is the time to clean this up. You need to polish the inside of this crevice where you've just filed out, because you will not have the ability to do that after you have set that pearl and soldered our peg into here. So at this point, take the time now, get this to the polished state or pre-polished state. Definitely polish the inside of this, and then we're ready to create our pearl stem. To polish the inside of this, I like to use a number of like the silicone polishing wheels. They come in cylinders, so that makes it easy to get into these areas. Once you have everything ready, go ahead and give this your high polish. Now that I have a nice final polish on my piece, I'm going to place it back on the ring mandrel. I'm going to use a center punch, and we are going to drill a small divot right into the center of that little groove. The divot here from the center punch is so that our drill bit doesn't skitter around. Next, I'm going to use a 0.8 millimeter drill bit and drill down ever so slightly, just so that we have a place to insert the pearl stem and the solder. Once you have that little divot knocked into there or drilled into there, we're going to use a 10 millimeter piece of 1 millimeter wire, which is approximately 18 gauge. And we are just going to solder this into place like so, and then we will trim it and finish up our polish, insert our pearl, and we'll be done. For this part, I'm again going to coat my piece with some boric acid, and that is going to help protect that polished area, especially right there around where we're going to be putting that pearl peg. The next thing I'm going to do is clean and flux the stem here. So I have here just a few pieces of easy solder, and what I'm going to do is get that attached onto the bottom of my stem. So I've placed the wire here into the tweezers. I'm just ever so gently going to come in and kind of heat this up, just so that we get that solder to tack on to the bottom of our stem, like so. Then I'm now going to come up to the ring, and I'm going to warm our ring up. And this is not going to take a whole lot of heat here. We're just going to get things all warmed up. And I'm going to bring our little stem right into here. And once we get that soldered into place, the stem will fall right into that crevice. And there we go. I'm going to quench this, pickle this, and then we're ready to move to the next step. So next, I'm just going to trim away this pearl stem. I will buff and polish this, and then all we have left to do is to glue our pearl into place. For our final step, we just need to glue our pearl into place, and we are done. So I'm just going to use a little bit of super glue. And And it doesn't take a whole lot. There's a little bit extra that got out there, so I'll wipe that off really fast. Insert my pearl. Hold it here for just a second. And now I will let it set. And then we'll be finished.
So there we have it, another project finished. Now, like I said before, you guys, I'm still learning. My ring is not even perfect. There's a few little things, but I made better improvement on this one than I did from my first, my second, and now my third. So if your first couple don't turn out quite right, try it again, and I promise you will get better. If you like these videos, please be sure to subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and make sure you ring that bell so that you get the notifications when I create new videos and get them out here. Thanks so much, you guys. I will see you guys next time.